Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of TCE Talks. This is a bit of a crossover. It could also belong in the Mouthpiece Musings category, but I do want to kind of keep the TCE as a central part of the conversation in relation to this topic. So today I'm going to be discussing playing on small trumpet mouthpieces. Very, very small trumpet mouthpieces, in fact, and how to acclimatize yourself, how to make the switch, how to give it a go, how to get used to trying on something smaller. So that will follow my lovely introduction now. Okay, so welcome back. Welcome back to me. It's been a while since I've made one of these videos. Those who know me well will understand why. Those who don't, I can only apologize. But rest assured that even if the frequency of my videos has dropped off, I absolutely do intend to carry on making them over the long term. So this is just how way things are. Okay, so first of all, before I say anything else, I want to give a massive shout out to Donovan Bankhead, who has got a series. He's got a YouTube channel called Trumpet Thoughts. He has recently, or I say in the last, I'm going to guess 6 months or so, started experimenting with the TCE. He did have a kind of a lesson with me. It was more like a really long geek out, and we just chatted about theories and the TCE, and I gave him some tips about how to practice it. But he, like me, is very much on his own journey in respect to changing his playing into the TCE direction. Obviously, I made that switch 10 years ago, and I've got to a point where I am a TCE user. Let's just put it like that. I've spent a lot of time and money taking lessons from very experienced people like Barb Civiletti, well, I've had lessons with all of them. So anyway, not the point. I think sometimes I kind of try to, I try not to put myself on some kind of pedestal in terms of this is a perfect example of what a TCE player is. Because at the end of the day, we just use these ideas and these practices to improve our trumpet playing. So I am a trumpet player. I just happen to have massively improved my playing through the ideas that were used by Bob Civiletti and Jerome Callett, developed by them, is included in their books. Spent many years studying and practicing that work, and that has really opened up a lot of benefits for me in terms of my playing. But at the end of the day, I'm a guy with a trumpet, and that's the important thing. I just make these videos because I think it's massively important that somebody who has lived experience of this technique over the long term communicates what they have learned effectively to others. And that's something that I felt for a long time was sorely lacking in the world. In the world of brass pedagogy is probably a good way to finish that sentence. Anyway, I wanted to shout out to Donovan because he's been making some great content. Really discussing some of the finer points about what he is discovering as he's doing this. But in recent weeks, he's put out a couple videos on the subject of small mouthpieces. Sorry, I got a bit of an itch. This is not one of my mouthpieces. This is not actually one of. It's not even a Super Chops or a Jerome Callett or a Bob Civiletti mouthpiece. This is what I'm clutching in my hand here. Is what I think is probably the smallest mouthpiece I own, which is an Ingram V made by Pickett Brass, I believe. And basically, I'm going to do a bit of a demonstration about how to acclimatize to using a small mouthpiece if it's not something you're happy with. And along the way, hopefully explain a little bit about Yeah, some of the ideology, the TCE ideology that accompanies that that choice. Why would you actually want to be playing on a small mouthpiece? And those sorts of things. Or well, I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll just see. I'm going to talk and see what happens. So basically, this is a little system that I devised. It's not particularly advanced. Little system I devised many years ago. I think sort of when I was a full-time brass teacher, and I was never a full-time brass teacher, but part of my portfolio of work as a self-employed musician was teaching brass instruments at all, during the day, playing trumpet and music at night, along with arrangements and various other musical things, writing books and all this sort of music trumpet stuff. I was doing instrument repair and everything. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting so sidetracked. This little, basically, people would come to me for TCE lessons, and they would just, the initial thing is always the mouthpiece. And I think that, we have to start off by sort of observing this and going, oh yeah, Jerome Callett used to make mouthpieces. That was his business, is that he was trying to sell mouthpieces. I'm not going to say to make a living, but it was his business. And so he was constantly coming out with new mouthpiece designs, and he was constantly, trying to sell people these mouthpieces. And I've speculated before that when you observe the evolution of his teaching ideas alongside the evolution of his mouthpiece designs and instruments, you can see how they did go hand in hand. And so some of the older equipment is far better suited to the more trumpet yoga / super chops stuff than, the later super chop series of mouthpieces that he brought out after he retired. I don't think Jerome Callett ever really retired in the traditional sense, but but yeah, you can definitely see how his teaching ideas and his mouthpiece designs went hand in hand. And so when people come to TCE, what they immediately are talking about is, I've heard I have to change onto a tiny mouthpiece. Now, my experience is that forcing myself to learn to play on something that was completely alien to me really, really accelerated my ability to learn the TCE, because I had no choice. I had to, I would pick up my instrument and it would have a small mouthpiece in it, and I had to make it work. And that includes, this is the first sort of thing where I'm going to sort of start responding to some of the things that Donovan has said, because in his videos, I think he's talking a lot of sense. He's questioning some traditional ideas, but I don't agree 100% with everything that he said. So I had to be able to play high and low and loud and soft on a very small mouthpiece. Now, there's a concept out there that I think is explained really well in the Balanced Embouchure book, which is that of focus in the chops. That's the way that Jeff Smiley refers to it in that book. The way that Jerome Callett described it to me was he would talk about the lip collapsing into the cup. That one of his sort of general ideas that I think is quite misunderstood is the idea that that the lips need to grip the tongue, and in doing so, that they resist the airstream, and that prevents them from falling into the cup. If you overblow, if you use too much air to create a sound, then the lips collapse into the cup and they lose the ability to vibrate. Now, the thing is that you can see this in traditional players when, they will blow harder to try and play higher notes, or even just to play too loud, let's be honest. And the result is you blow the aperture wide open. That's the lip collapsing into the cup. And your only solution is to use is mouthpiece pressure and more air. And you end up in this cycle that you can pretty much join this cycle at any point. But having this tiny mouthpiece prevents that from being an option for you. You cannot overblow because it will just shut you down. It stops working. It backs up in terms of it feels really hard to blow air through, but also, many people talk about bottoming out. Your lip will actually touch the cup and stop vibrating as well. Now, the thing is, because of the way that the TCE embouchure is, it's a closed type embouchure. There's that sort of thing isn't really going to happen so much. In the Balanced Embouchure book, there's a section where Jeff Smiley talks about those who can focus, and what he's saying, and this is something that I agree with entirely, is that if you can play on a small mouthpiece, you can also play on a big mouthpiece. You sort of develop a bit of independence from your equipment. But I've rarely found the opposite to be true. Those who really who love to play on a big mouthpiece very often cannot then pick up a small one and play and make it work. A big part of that, and this is TCE ideology. A big part of that is tone concept. Now, this is something that people are going to argue about, but we need to kind of accept that not everyone needs to sound the same. But something with traditional tone concept is to get this big fat sound in the low register and to try to carry that sound up into the upper register. And I don't think that works, because this round, dark sound that people want in the low register is devoid of overtones. It doesn't have vibrancy or resonance. And so when you then try to take that up into the upper register, you don't have those pitches present in your sound. And so trying to excite and get resonance on a high pitch when you're playing with a dull, dark, spread sound, it's basically not really possible. I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible. There's a fantastic video of Wynton Marsalis playing an absolutely blinding solo over... I can't remember what it was, but he's playing this massive, heavy-ass trumpet. And this trumpet is dampened so much that it doesn't really resonate. And for someone who many would argue could be one of the best trumpet players ever to have lived, or let's say of the 20th century, without a shadow of a doubt, to be struggling playing in the register that he's perfectly capable of playing in all day and all night, just because he's got such a heavy instrument, is a perfect demonstration of this idea in action. It's I mean, let's not get into me talking about why you would spend 25 grand on a trumpet that sounds like a cornet, but that is kind of what we're talking about, is that a lot of people are not trying to create the correct sound on a trumpet. So something that happens when you start to learn to play on really small equipment is you have to realize that rather than taking the dark sound and using it as you ascend, which isn't really physically viable for well, I'm going to just say anyone. I don't care. I just think that it's wrong. What you should do is take that resonant, vibrant, bright sound that you have above the stave and bring it down so that you can then play the full range of the instrument with a compact, focused sound. Now, the thing is that I've spent a lot of time on videos and podcasts in the past arguing about how actually that sound is what the audience hears anyway, that you have the core and the overtones. What is focused is what projects, and that's what the audience hears. This spread sound around you that enables you to hear yourself easily. Well, that's lovely for you, and it's lovely for your colleagues, but the audience aren't hearing it anyway, so just stop doing it. This is actually something, again, I'm going to just keep referring back to these Trumpet Thoughts videos because Donovan's doing such a good job. He describes experiencing this himself, how he is playing in a big band at the moment, and because of using the TCE, he's noticed that he hears himself bouncing off the back wall more so than anyone around him, but he can hear himself less in the ensemble whereas the players, you can hear plenty of them here but not out there. And at the end of the day, we're not really playing for ourselves in that respect, we're playing for the audience. And so this comes down to this kind of logic of why make yourself work harder. It just does. There's no advantage to working harder, putting in more and getting out less, the opposite of efficiency. Anyway, so that's a little bit of the how and why. It's a little bit of tone concept ideology, stuff that I'm sure, there are plenty of people, and probably the majority, in fact, that disagree with that idea. But this is the thing, is that I think that Donovan's being very diplomatic in his videos when he's talking about how you might want to create a different sound. You might want a more complex sound. You will need a sound that blends well with others. And for him, that means he's happy to change mouthpieces to accommodate that. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. But the thing that he says that I disagree with is that and he doesn't actually say it's not possible, but he says it's much more difficult to play the lowest fifth. So let's say from low F sharp to the C sharp, just the gap between the lowest two harmonics with all three valves held down on a B flat trumpet. That it's much more difficult or much more challenging to play those notes on a mouthpiece with a diameter like this, which is about it's about 0.600 inches. I think that a fundamental part of mastering the TCE is practicing and learning those lowest notes on the small equipment, because for that you need to be the most disciplined. You need to be able to use the smallest amount of air, compress the air in your mouth, and still get that clean attack on the lowest notes. Now the thing is that I've got a video on Instagram of me demonstrating sort of playing up to double high C, starting off with a lip relaxation exercise, and that was a huge part of the trumpet yoga thing. Was although that it was about unfurling the lips, the other sort of massive part of trumpet yoga was just total relaxation. And when you look at the Super Chops video and book as well, Jerome Kallett talks about your face. You should place the mouthpiece onto a completely relaxed face, almost as though you don't know how to play the trumpet. And from low F sharp to the C in the staff, which is an octave and a half of range. It's half of the average trumpet player's range. You should not engage the chops at all. It should be completely relaxed as you play. And I think that, again, that's one of those ideas that contributes a lot to our stamina, is that if you're not using effort in the lowest octave and a half of the trumpet, then you've still got something to give as you then ascend, and it will have more effect. Okay. So I think that, a big part, just to summarize, a big part of the TCE is actually learning to master those lowest notes on the small equipment. I mean, again, we're using this small equipment just because it makes our lives easier. I think that it actually makes it easier to create a characteristic trumpet sound, and I have proven that many times in my own playing. When I get the compliments from orchestral conductors and singers in live bands and that sort of thing, who always say things like, "Oh, I can hear you playing much easier than other trumpet players," and it's like, well, yes, that's because I'm occupying the correct part of the audio spectrum when I toot notes on my horn. Anyway, I haven't gotten into the thing that I want to talk about, and I know this always happens, and I'm not going to apologize for it this time. So yeah, that's great. Just a quick little thing, Donovan, keep it up. I'm loving your videos. It's really takes a weight off my shoulders for there to be another sensible person out there talking about these ideas and explaining them so succinctly as you do. So great job. Getting on to how to adjust to a small mouthpiece. So let's imagine that you are a 1.5 C player. That would be every trumpet player I ever meet. Well, not really, but back when back, things are actually changing a little bit. But back along, everyone was a 1.5 C player. When I was at music school in the 90s. every kid in the school had a Vincent Bach Stradivarius trumpet with a 1.5C or a 1.5B mouthpiece. That's what our teacher made everyone play on. And it was a very traditional thing. And, obviously we all played very well with that equipment, but I think that these days, thankfully, we're sort of moving beyond that. There are better manufacturers making better equipment than a Vincent Bach. What the hell am I doing with this hair? Than Vincent Bach does today. Okay, here's your little exercise. I figured this out, or at least I started experimenting with it whilst driving. So don't do the same as me. You'll get pulled up by the police. Believe it or not, I have actually been pulled up by the police for mouthpiece buzzing in the car. So let's keep that one quiet. But this isn't a mouthpiece buzzing exercise so much, but basically I think that the idea is that the reason people go, oh, I love this mouthpiece, it feels so good, is because what they mean is, I love this mouthpiece, I'm used to how it feels. This feels normal to me. This is like putting on an old pair of slippers. And essentially, all you have to do in order to acclimatize to the physical sensation of placing the mouthpiece on your chops is to do it a bunch of times. Now, when it comes to the playing of the instrument, that's another kettle of fish, and we'll definitely get into that as well, because obviously this is what this is all about. Learning the TCE is about learning to play with less air, less collapse of the chops, etc., everything I've already talked about. But I think that fundamentally, a lot of people, when they talk about what they think embouchure is, their definition is, where do you place the mouthpiece on your lips? Now, a big part of that, obviously, that does relate to your dental structure. You can see I've got pretty messed up teeth. They don't, there's, there's all sorts of, my teeth aren't really straight. I've got ones that stick out. I've got ones that overlap. When I was about 14 years old, I went to the orthodontist and they said to me, you can either play the cornet or you can have straight teeth. And I was like, I think I'll just carry on playing the cornet. And so this is the cards I was dealt. This is the thing, is that when your lips interact with the rim of a mouthpiece, we have our standard amount of top lip that we expect to feel and the amount of bottom lip that we expect to feel in the cup. And so if you're not used to a mouthpiece, then you're going to put it on and there's going to be a lot of squirming around trying to find that same sensation that you're used to. You want the same part of your lips from front to back to intercept inside this shape, as well as feeling the top and the bottom. And when you come to a small mouthpiece, you might be trying to cram the lip in there. Not actually a bad idea, generally speaking, because you are limited by the size of the mouthpiece and you're not really going to achieve an awful lot. But Jerry Callett said to me once that the more lip you can get into the cup, the better your sound, which does kind of contradict the whole collapse thing somewhat, but he was a master of contradiction, so we'll leave that one with him. But you'll have noticed that throughout this chat, all I've been doing is just repeatedly placing the mouthpiece onto the lips, getting used to how it feels. And I could put it over here, and I can put it over here. And certain things feel more or less normal just because of how I usually play. But you can experiment with angles as well. And I would just say that you could spend a good half an hour, like I am right now, chatting and just placing the mouthpiece on your lips and figuring out how it feels. Now, I think that I try to encourage people to have an anchor point on their bottom lip. I think for me, if I use a bigger mouthpiece, I have much more top lip in the cup. If I use a smaller one, it gets closer and closer to 50-50. Obviously, it's never going to be 50-50 because that doesn't really work. You must have an air direction which is upstream or downstream. I think that the TCE really encourages a downstream flow of air. And so it's always going to be a little bit more top lip than bottom. Having said that, there are some fantastic upstream TCE users out there. So this is just what I'm used to physically. Bob Civiletti says it doesn't matter what direction the air goes in. It just has to, the important thing is that you're compressing it in the mouth. The sound, the note is created inside the mouth. And then you're spitting that out, small packets of air. So sorry, Mr. Soundman, it's just the way things are. So yeah, step one is literally just, figuring out where it feels comfortable. And the more you do this, the easier it will become for you to find the correct position. So, if I were using either of these, this is a Calit 1SS, this is the Bob Civiletti TCE3. Interestingly, the rims on those are remarkably similar. But yeah, with either of those, I can, because I've done this so many times, I'm so used to finding that position. But that's the first thing you need to establish, is just stop making a fuss, figure out how to make it feel nice. And the best thing is to just keep doing it. This is taking it away from the instrument. We're not playing yet. And I would say that the stage 2, now that I've talked for a bit, stage 2 is going to be just blowing some air through this. So again, this is not very TCE-esque, but I'm just going to start going buzz unintentional. That's the thing with having your tongue up, touching your lips all the time, is that it's actually quite hard not to create a sound when you blow air through. But what we're doing here is we're just experimenting and feeling the physical feedback that you get from that mouthpiece. One of the biggest things with going from a deep mouthpiece to a shallow mouthpiece is that you feel a physical feedback of your air bouncing off the cup. And it happens more immediately, but over time, when you're using a small mouthpiece like this one, or like Super Chop's mouthpiece or something, maybe a Neoteric brass mouthpiece that I make and sell on my website, then then you become quite reliant on that physical feedback. You start to like it. It gives you something to push against. It gives you the immediacy of attack that you're craving for quality, clean trumpet playing. And I think that when I go to a deeper cup, although it's easy to start off playing and thinking, again, keeping it in the mouth, thinking of spitting as your primary form of note production, over time, using a bigger mouthpiece, you're more likely to start blowing a little more because you're craving that physical feedback. And I think that's probably a trap that a lot of people fall into. But anyway, so stage 2, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what I'm feeling physically whilst I'm doing this. See, I can just open up the chops and blow air through, and that's going to feel pretty much the same on most mouthpieces. All of these mouthpieces have a small throat. The 1SS has got a 29. This is actually a cornet mouthpiece, so it's got a 29 throat at the bottom of the double cup. This Roger Ingram one is a 30. But when you're just blowing air through it, most mouthpieces are going to feel the same. So what I want to do is start to simulate playing. And I think that one of the few positives to mouthpiece buzzing is that you can start getting used to that pressurizing the air in the mouth before release. And then when you do that, you'll start to find a balance point where you can actually release a really clean and easy sound. What I'm kind of doing there is, now most of that resistance is coming from me. That lines up with a lot of tongue orientated pedagogy, is that you're creating the resistance to the airstream with the tongue, and then you can start to feel familiar. Again, I've made a few sounds on this mouthpiece. I've placed it onto my lips probably 50 times. I'm blowing a little bit of air through it. And at that point, that's when you could probably reach for your trumpet and put it in and just try to feel how you're going to get a sound out. Now, something that David Hickman talks about in his book Trumpet Pedagogy is this I can't remember the words he uses, but I'm making sound, just not, it's a whisper. It's a whisper tone. I'm not actually playing notes. I'm actually just initiating a sort of a popping resonance with pitch. But now I hope that records well. I'm kind of tempted to try one pointed at the microphone, and I'll edit it out if it sounds awful, but it's more like funny kind of leaning back, but you can hear small packets of air. You can hear the pitches of notes. I can distinctly play low and high in this way. And I can, I'm sitting right on that point before the note speaks, where there is resonance, but it's not a tone. So that would be my stage 3, is actually just to get used to, again, I've gotten really used to placing this mouthpiece on. I found the resistance that the mouthpiece provides. I've gotten used to that. And now I'm just trying to feel where the note speaks. And as soon as I've gotten used to that, then I can start to actually play some sounds. And I'm not going to do this now because the mic is set up for me talking, and things you can't see around me are dampening the sound. So I cannot face the right direction in order to play at the mic. But that's where I think I'll leave this. It seems like a little bit of an abstract idea where I've described half of an exercise, but essentially those 3 steps are what I would take in order to acclimatize to a mouthpiece before I start trying to play it. And from there I would just go into simple slurs, descending arpeggios, everything. A lot of what I do is all based around harmonic series stuff, and needless to say, plenty of double pedal tones. Double pedal tones come out a lot easier on the smaller mouthpieces, and that says a lot about how that's all about the unfurling of the lips, which many other famous players talk about. Is that you can very easily play double pedals on the tiniest mouthpieces, and so in slurring from the double pedals to the lowest notes of the trumpet, that's how you're going to discover the best way to play below the staff, and then you can carry that sensation and that sound concept upwards. So there we go. Okay, that's enough for now. I've jabbered a little bit. I at least wanted to get these ideas out there. I had other things to talk about, obviously, because I always do this, but we'll do it another time. Thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye for now.